Hey, everybody. Welcome to the MMOA podcast. My name is Shelby Blankenship. I am one of your TAs with the MMOA crew, and I am going to be talking about how to train for the Murph, specifically geared towards the older adult. So the Murph was this past yesterday for some, but this past weekend for a lot of our crew. I know a lot of you guys got after it yourselves. So just to give you a little background about what the Murph is, it is a 1 mile run, 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 squats, and another mile run. It is a very notoriously famous hero WOD in the CrossFit community, and one that a lot of our crew really wanted to participate in this year. So we wanted to make sure to set them up for success as much as possible. And so here I just want to kind of break down what we did for them. The first thing that is super crucial anytime you're doing this with anybody, but especially with the older adult population, is you want to get a baseline of their overall fitness. So whether that's they can only work out for 5 minutes at a time versus 10 minutes at a time versus 30 minutes, you want to get that initial baseline to make sure that as you are progressing to get ready for something as intense as a hero WOD or the Murph specifically, that you're not setting them up for failure, especially for like an overuse injury. As we all know, overuse injuries can really kind of make people have to scale back quite a bit. So we really want to make sure to set them up for success. The second thing that you really want to think about is timeline. How much time do you have to prepare somebody? So we made sure to have 8 weeks of prep. We had actually just finished a strength training 12-week regimen with our crew before we transitioned to doing Murph prep. And just for some background, when we were doing our Murph prep, our baseline of our crew was that they could do either jumping pull-ups or they were scaling to doing banded pull-ups for a lot of our workouts. So we did not factor in like ring rows or banded. So just know that is also an option when you're looking at your baseline. But for timeline, 8 weeks tends to be a pretty good realm. If you've ever prepped for the Murph yourself, 6 weeks tends to be a little too short. Anything beyond 8 weeks tends to be a little too long. Just because it's a lot of repetitions and movements. And you really want to kind of create this work-rest ratio that gradually goes up. So you might have to start with like a 1-to-1 work-rest ratio where maybe they do like 1 round of Cindy, which is 5, 10, 15 of that rep scheme of pull-up, push-up, squat. And then you have them rest for 2 minutes, saying it took them 2 minutes, and then kind of do that for maybe like 3 to 4 rounds. And then from there, you can kind of progress further with either decreasing the rest time, which is ultimately the kind of goal where you kind of are able to create more opportunity to get more of those reps in, or you're just doing more volume. Because with Murph, volume is the name of the game. And you want to make sure that they can hang on for at least probably 45 minutes, depending on what rep scheme of Murph that they're doing. So that kind of goes into my next thing that we really made sure we did was have scaling opportunities. So with the scaling opportunities, this went into the WOD that we did that day, as well as for the actual day of. So during the prep, we did this on Fridays because we knew we were going to do it on a Friday leading up to Murph. And we had different rep schemes. Some were AMRAPs and some were EMOMs. So when we did it as an AMRAP, that tended to be more towards the latter end of our training, and the EMOM style tended to be more on the front end. So the first time that we did this, we actually did this as an every 5 minutes on the minute. We had them do about 250 meters on a machine, or like 1 lap around our building, which is around 250 meters. If they wanted to start practicing like jogging, especially if they haven't ran in a while. And then we had them do 2 rounds of 3, 6, 9 rep scheme. And then they rest the remainder until that 5 minutes was up. And then we repeated that for a total of 25 minutes. So really, when you look at that, that's quite a bit of that work-rest ratio, but you're still building in that volume. So we kind of had a good idea of where they were getting at from a volume perspective, but also work rest ratio, so that the next week we could up the ante a little bit. We either did an every 4 minute on the minute, or we increased the reps to maybe do a 4-8-12 of that Cindy complex. Those are really, really helpful, because what you want to make sure is that you're building in that rest for this crew. One, because their endurance is probably not ready to go from doing maybe like 10 to 15 minute WODs to 30 to 45 minutes continuous movement. It's just a totally different gear that you have to check in on. So just kind of be mindful of that, not only for the older adults in like a gym setting, but if you were doing this in like a home health setting or something like that, where you're trying to do maybe something a little bit unique, if they are into like doing things like hero WOD, you want to have that work rest ratio so that they can be successful for consecutive rounds versus just totally coming out hot on that first couple of, every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes. And then they just like immediately plummet. Like you want them to feel successful at the end of the workout and that they got a good workout in. So those are a couple ideas for in session when you're trying to scale the class. Now for day of, what's really important is our classes are usually about 45 minutes to an hour long. So you kind of have to build in, the warm-up time and then what the actual workout is going to be. Now, I know if you've ever done Murph before, usually an hour is kind of like that average time frame, depending on how you scale it, that most people complete it in. So what we did is we had about a 10-minute warm-up focusing on calf strength and mobility, because this one can be pretty heavy on the calves if you haven't walked, jogged in a while, or we did like rowing as an option for our machine work. And then you also want to factor in like hip mobility and upper body strength and mobility to get those shoulders nice and warm, because the last thing you want is somebody to hurt their shoulder or something like that. So just kind of keep that in mind. We want a really good warm up. I feel like a lot of older adults tend to need a longer warm up than people tend to give them credit for. So that 10 to 15 minute realm tends to be really successful with this crew. The way we did it as far as the Murph, we actually had we had 3 options for people so they could choose their hard that day. So we had it where they could do a half Murph. So we did 800 meters on the machines, or 4 to 5 laps around our building. Then we had them do Cindy broken up, so 5, 10, 15, like we talked about previously, and they did 10 rounds of that, and then they finished with the 800 meter. Most people were finishing in about 40 to 45 minutes, which was really, really great, and also just kind of was not only like a really good workout, but it was also really meaningful for them, and they were able to participate to their highest capacity, which was awesome. The other way we did this is doing it as a partner WOD. This I think is really, really nice, especially for those people who like a little bit of competition, or they really like having some accountability when doing really tough workouts, especially these ones where they can be a little bit monotonous. It can just kind of keep the fire burning and also provide that work rest ratio if somebody needs it. So we had people do 1,600. So they basically did the full Murph, but they split it between the two. So they had, if we were doing it on the rower, for example, we did 1,600 meters, which I mean, is not a mile like equivalent for running, but it's relatively, speaking from an ease for accountability standpoint. So we had one person do 200 meters, then the next person did 200 meters, and they would go back and forth like that for 4 rounds. And then they would do each 10 rounds of Cindy, where they would do 5, 10, 15, then partner 2 would do 5, 10, 15, etc. Did that for 10 rounds, and then they would finish just like they started. They could do the same machine or different machines depending on their fatigue level. And I think that was really, really helpful to kind of keep people motivated, especially when you see your friends working really hard and you're part of a team. It allows you it doesn't allow you that opportunity to quit, right? I think it's way easier when you're by yourself and you're like, yeah, who cares? But when you have a partner that you're trying to be accountable with, I think that is super, super helpful, especially with this crew. They don't like letting people down, and it keeps them motivated for for longer periods of a WOD when like it gets into that 35, 40-minute realm. Things can get really, really spicy. So just to kind of rehash how we did this for the Murph, we found our baseline for our crew. So we might have started with either 10 to 15 minutes as our normal WOD time. So we started there and then slowly started to increase by about 5 minutes each week, with changing up that work to rest ratio, whether it's 1-to-1 and then start with that 2-to-1, 3-to-1, etc. We made sure we had a really nice timeline. 8 weeks tended to be the sweet spot for us. I'd be curious if any of y'all have done this before, if you have any other thoughts. And we tried to keep it that same day of the week. So it was always on Fridays. So they always had at least 2 days of rest between then and when they could potentially do another workout at our place. And then scaling opportunities. We made sure that not only for the workouts that they came into that Friday, where we either did them as AMRAPs or EMOM style, but we also made sure, like, if somebody needed a higher box that day or was doing jumping pull-ups instead of using a band, like, we had those variations available depending on what they were battling with that day, to make sure that they still got a really good workout regardless of their situation. And then for the day of, we made sure to have different variations so that we could fit that whole Murph Hero WOD environment within that hour, while maintaining that 10 to 15 minute warm up, and then about 40 to 45 minutes for that WOD, so that they could have a really good workout, feel really accomplished, and be able to tell all their friends and their family that they just did a hero WOD, especially the Murph. Everyone seems to know what that one is. So really key is making sure that they can handle endurance and volume of those movements. So really making sure we're training that is really key with this population. So as far as courses that we have coming up, we have a live at Scottsdale, Arizona on June 1st. And then we have one in Spring, Texas coming up in June 8th. L1 and L2 are currently going on. The next L1 is starting August 14th, and the next L2 is not until October 17th. I know that the L2 sold out this past cohort, so make sure if that's something you're needing for your cert or you're wanting to do, make sure to sign up earlier rather than later. Hope y'all have had a great day, great Tuesday, and I hope to see you in the class soon.